I found the note tucked under my door at 6:42 a.m. No text, no knock, just silence. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's perfect cursive, as if this were just another polite RSVP. The wedding is off. We've contacted our attorney. Don't embarrass yourself further. No explanation. No warning. Just 36 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. At first, I stared at it like it couldn't be real. Surely this was a joke, an overreaction. But then my phone buzzed. A voicemail from the venue: "Your parents have informed us the event is cancelled." Another from the caterer. Another from Daniel's mother. The world I had spent a year building, every flower, guest, dress fitting, plan, crashed in slow motion. But this wasn't grief I was feeling. Not yet. It was something else. A cold clarity settled over me. Because I'd known, deep down, that they were capable of this. My parents didn't just disapprove of Daniel, they despised the idea of me choosing something, someone, without their permission. This wasn't a wedding cancellation. This was war, and the next 48 hours would reveal just how far they were willing to go. But also, how far I'd come. They thought they could end everything with a note. They had no idea what I had prepared for this moment. By 9 a.m., it was no longer a private matter. Daniel's sister called me in tears. My parents had reached out to her directly, claiming I was unstable and not fit for marriage. They told her the wedding was a tragic mistake and that they were stepping in for my own good. By noon, the venue had publicly removed our booking from their calendar. My florist, who had already delivered half the arrangements, texted me, "I'm so sorry. I heard what happened. Do you want me to come pick up the flowers?" My bridal party group chat went silent, and when I tried to call my parents, just to understand what was going on, my dad sent one line: "Speak to our lawyer. We are no longer involved in this farce." I wasn't just being abandoned. I was being framed. Daniel was calm, too calm. He offered to elope, to run away from the drama. But I could see it in his eyes: confusion, fear, doubt. Their plan was working. They wanted me isolated, humiliated, questioning everything I had built. And for a few hours, it worked. I curled up on the bathroom floor in my apartment, still in the robe I slept in, trying to stop shaking. Because how do you fight back against your own parents when they've already convinced the world you've lost your mind? But that moment, me, alone, broken, abandoned, was exactly what I needed. It reminded me of all the other times they'd tried to crush my independence. It reminded me that I'd survived worse. And this time, I wasn't going to survive quietly. While they thought they had blindsided me, what they didn't know was that I had already started preparing for a moment like this. Months ago, after yet another dinner where my father belittled Daniel to his face and my mother cried about how I was choosing wrong, something inside me snapped, quietly. I stopped arguing. I started preparing. I found a therapist, someone outside their social circle. I began documenting everything: voicemails, texts, the financial leverage they used to keep me under their thumb. I quietly moved my savings into a separate account, opened in a different city, and I read. God, I read. Legal blogs, case studies on financial coercion, the intricacies of parental control over adult children. I even had the prenup, one they forced me to sign, reviewed by a separate attorney. She raised her eyebrows and said, "This wasn't written to protect you. It was written to trap you." So we amended one clause, added a notarized rider. Legally binding. And they never noticed. What they saw was a quiet, obedient daughter. What they missed was the strategist I had quietly become. I didn't need revenge. I needed precision. So when the note arrived and the wedding was nuked in front of everyone I loved, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I took a deep breath and I opened my laptop. Because if they wanted to play games with lawyers and lies, they were about to find out I could play too. only better. By evening, the smear campaign had evolved into a full-blown spectacle. My parents went beyond canceling the wedding, they went public. They sent emails to extended family claiming I was being emotionally manipulated by Daniel. They contacted my HR department with vague concerns about my mental fitness. They even posted a veiled message on Facebook. Sometimes love blinds us. But as parents, we must intervene before a life is destroyed. My phone was a war zone of calls, texts, and pitying images. Aunt Linda uninvited herself. My college roommate wrote, "I hope you're okay. I heard what your dad said about Daniel's background." And worst of all, Daniel started to waver. He asked, "Do you think we should postpone?" Just to clear things up. They weren't just trying to stop the wedding, they were trying to dismantle my entire support system. And they were almost succeeding. But what they didn't realize, what they would never understand, was that every person they tried to manipulate only added to the evidence I was compiling. Every email, every phone call, every forwarded screenshot. It became a digital mountain of proof. Not just of emotional sabotage, but of something darker. Because in one forwarded message from a former family accountant, sent innocently, without context, was something that made my breath catch, a reference to a trust account. In my name. Used for tax deductions. Without my consent. The wedding. That was just the tip of the iceberg. My parents weren't just trying to control my marriage, they had been financially exploiting me for years. And now, they had drawn the line themselves. By declaring legal war, they had opened the door to discovery, and I intended to walk straight through it, with everything I had. The next morning, I changed my strategy from defense to offense. At 8 a.m., I called the attorney who helped me review the prenup. By 9 o'clock, we had filed for legal emancipation, an adult severance from parental rights and financial interference. Rare, but not impossible. By noon, she submitted a formal inquiry into the trust account bearing my name. And by 3 p.m., we had filed a motion requesting a temporary restraining order to prevent further defamation and sabotage. I wasn't just protecting my wedding anymore. I was untangling myself, legally, financially, permanently. And the beauty of it all, because they had gone public with their accusations, every claim they made was now admissible. Every lie became fuel. Every threat, evidence. Meanwhile, I reached out to the people who had gone silent. Not to beg for support, but to offer the truth. I invited them to a live stream that night, a quiet, private Zoom for friends and extended family. Daniel and I sat side by side, calmly laying out what had happened. We shared the note, the voicemail, the timeline. And then I shared something else. I pulled up a screen share and showed the trust account, one my parents had been using to funnel money and claim deductions, while telling me I was bad with finances. I had been used as a tax shelter. Silently, consistently, for years. And now, the mask was off. The chat blew up. My Aunt Linda apologized. My cousin David asked how I'd stayed so calm. Even Daniel looked at me with new eyes, like he was finally seeing the whole of me. Not just the woman who loved him, but the woman who had outmaneuvered the people who thought they owned her. The confrontation happened where I always knew it would, in a courtroom. My parents hadn't expected I'd actually follow through on legal emancipation. They showed up with forced expressions of wounded dignity, expecting to negotiate, control, intimidate. They didn't realize the hearing wasn't just about our strained relationship. It was about fraud. When the judge asked why I was seeking emancipation at nearly 30, I handed over a binder. Documented patterns of coercion. Evidence of threats to my job. Messages slandering Daniel, my friends, even my therapist. And then came the final blow, the notarized testimony of their former accountant, confirming that for 5 years, my parents had used a trust in my name without my consent to claim over $180,000 in tax benefits. All under the guise of family accounting. My father turned red. My mother began to cry, real tears, this time. But it was too late. Their manipulation had crossed into criminal territory. The judge paused. Then said firmly, "This isn't just a request for emancipation. This is a request for freedom from exploitation. I find the motion valid and grant it." She turned to my parents. "You have until the end of the month to return all financial control to the petitioner. And you are hereby barred from interfering with her personal or professional life in any capacity." They tried to speak, to protest, to beg. But I didn't flinch. I stood, looked my father in the eye, and said, "You could have just loved me. That would have been free." And I walked out, past their stunned faces, into the sunlight, and into my life, finally mine. That very evening, Daniel and I held a small ceremony, not the grand wedding my parents had tried to cancel, but something far more meaningful. Under twinkling fairy lights in my backyard, surrounded by friends and family who truly believed in us. I wore a simple dress I bought myself. No lavish flowers, no expensive venue, just love, truth, and freedom. The news spread quickly. The same relatives who once whispered doubts now called to congratulate me. The neighbors who saw me as the rebellious daughter stopped by with flowers and apologies. Even the family accountant, who testified, sent a heartfelt message. "You showed us all what real strength looks like." But the biggest surprise came 2 weeks later. A formal investigation uncovered more than just the trust account misuse. Hidden debts taken out in my name. Credit accounts opened without consent. Assets sold off without my knowledge. The authorities moved in. My parents faced charges that went far beyond family drama. And through it all, I stood firm. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice. I proved that a daughter labeled naive and obedient could outthink, outlast, and outshine those who tried to control her. I reclaimed my name, my future, and my wedding day. And as Daniel whispered, "I love you," under those backyard stars, I finally believed it myself. Because sometimes the most powerful vows aren't made at a church. They're made when you stand up for yourself and win.